on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You are listening to The Jan Price Show, and my guest today is international sports car star Hurley Haywood. Welcome to the show, Hurley.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to talking with you. We're going to talk about your brand new documentary entitled Hurley. And this was fascinating. I'll be honest with you, I don't follow car racing, so I was not aware of you. But it was I loved the documentary. How did the documentary come about?
Well, Patrick Dempsey and Derek Dodge approached me when we were racing in Atlanta about 5 years ago, I guess. And Patrick asked me, he said, I want you to talk to the filmmaker, to Derek Dodge, and he's got something that I think that you might be interested in, and if you agree, we'll start processing getting the film together. So the timing was perfect. The book had just about been put together, and that was started. So I had the book and the movie. So the message. Derek was a really great. He really paid a lot of attention to the film that he was and the story that he was trying to get across, and he did it with a very delicate touch. Some of the subject matter was sensitive. Suicide. My racing partner had died of suicide in the early '80s, and also what it was like to be gay in the '70s and '80s, which was not an easy thing. So I think the timing was right on it, and away we went, and the end result was pretty spectacular.
It really is. Now, you had your opening in L.A., right, on Monday?
On Monday, yeah. Orchard had a beautiful party, a reception at the Peterson Museum, and we had about, maybe 100 guests come view it, and it was really a nice affair, and everybody, I haven't gotten one single negative response from either from the film or from the book, so that's good.
That is good. That is good. Now, just so our audience knows, you're a 5-time 24-hour Daytona winner and 3-time winner of Le Mans. That's pretty amazing right there. And you're also a Trans Am champion. So let's talk a bit, because there are a lot of things I want to talk about. Let's talk about, how did you get into racing to begin with?
Well, I was born in Chicago, and right in the city, and then outside of the city we had 5 working farms, and my grandmother lived on sort of the farm that just produced hay for the horses, and we would go out and spend all of our vacation times, weekends, summer vacation, out on that farm. And by being on a farm, you can imagine there was hundreds of miles of road to explore, and our farm foreman put together I started driving a 1948 Studebaker truck. He made a special seat for me and blocks on the pedals, and away I went. And I drove that truck almost 4 years without my parents or my grandmother ever realizing I was bopping around the farm in that pickup truck.
And how old were you? How old were you when you were doing this?
I started when I was 12.
12, wow.
So basically, I drove that for 4 years, and then I got my regular license when I was 16. So by having all of that practice, I was pretty sufficient on all kinds of different road characteristics, gravel, dirt, asphalt, no roads at all. So, I kind of had it all. And when I went away to college, my parents were so thrilled that I had gotten through high school. I went to a boarding school up on the East Coast, and they were thrilled that I made it through, and I had a Corvette that I took with me to college, and I used to race the Corvette in autocrosses, and one weekend Peter Gregg, who owned Burmos Porsche, a very famous dealership, and also was very a good race car driver, and was with Porsche, and I beat him. And he sort of came up and introduced himself and said, you got to be pretty good to beat me. And that's started that friendship, and that guidance. He really was instrumental in laying down the law, laying down the principles that we race by, and he really helped me tremendously by giving me a platform that was almost unbeatable. You know, the best cars, the best team, and we dominated racing in the 70s. And then, unfortunately, he committed suicide, and in 1980. And but by that time, I had sort of made my own name and just continued on and became one of the owners of Brumos, and we had a new, somebody that came into it as our major owner, Dan Davis, and it all just kind of went together.
Yeah, it did all kind of come together. I mean, you used to be called Batman and Robin. I mean, Peter Gregg was Batman and you were his Robin. So you're right, you were dominating the race car circuit in the 70s for sure. Did you have any inclination that Peter was suffering from depression before he committed suicide? How much communication had you, because I know you kind of split apart there for a little bit. How much communication did the two of you have during that period of time?
Well, we really didn't have any discussions. We really didn't know what Peter's problem was, and we just knew that he was moody, and sometimes he would be really, a great guy, and other times he could be a real jerk. So it was, but we didn't have enough knowledge to say, okay, I think you've got a mental problem, and you need to get some help. And he was taking some lithium, which was kind of the drug that helped people get through some of these episodes. But he was a very smart guy, Harvard educated guy, and he said, I'm smarter than medicine. I can do this without medicine. And of course, we all know that didn't work. So, if today I was put in that same position, I would have immediately got the red flags up and knew exactly what his problem was. I think mental health issues with people, is kind of a stigma. People are embarrassed to say, I've got a mental health problem. And it's the same thing with the LGBT community. People are kind of embarrassed and afraid to talk about it. And I think in many cases that if you do talk about it, you can, find compassion, and you can solve a problem, or what potentially could be a problem down the line. So,
yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. And people, it sounds like he was bipolar. And is that what they finally diagnosed him as, or did anybody?
Yep,
bipolar, yeah. A lot of people who are bipolar feel exactly that same way. They like the highs, and they don't like feeling that numbness. I've talked to people who've gone through this, and they just stop taking their drugs because they don't like to feel that evenness, because they're used to the high and the lows too. But and they tend to stop. You're exactly right, taking the medication when it's so important that they do take it. So, but hindsight, you didn't know at the time what he was suffering from, and so that's how we learn in life, I suppose. So let's talk. Yeah, and I'm sure that was very devastating for you and everybody else that knew him well, and his family. But let's go into, because you decided, you've brought it up a couple times now in this conversation. So let's talk about, first of all, you're incredibly handsome today, still incredibly handsome, but back in your heyday, back in the 70s and 80s, you literally looked like Paul Newman, and you probably were racing with him too at the same time. I mean, you were just spectacularly gorgeous. So let's talk about that, because you had all these beautiful women on your arms all the time, and yet you were keeping this secret. And how did you keep that secret? So let's talk about how playing that duality was in your life too.
Well, the secret was well kept, and I really was very careful in keeping my private life and my business life completely separate. And it worked pretty well, but the industry And the people that I drove for and was close to in the racing business, they all knew that I was gay, but it was not something that was necessarily discussed, and it was not something that ever presented a problem because I could keep my foot down harder and longer than the guy next door, and I won a lot of races by being able to do that. And that's really what the teams cared about. They cared about, one, is he good enough to win? And the answer was yes. And is he good enough to bring the car back in one piece? And the answer to that is yes. So I developed a relationship or a sort of a mindset that Hurley was really quick and he could bring the car back in one piece, and that was important for teams. Mm-hmm. So as far, I was blessed with, my mother's good looks, and it was fun, and I had some great, sponsors. I had Penthouse Magazine was my sponsor for a while, and they had the most beautiful women in the world. But, people knew what my story was, but as I said, it was never something that was necessarily discussed. And as far as the, women from Penthouse Magazine, I think they sort of appreciated that fact that, I wasn't going to try to, jump in bed with some of those beautiful models. So it all kind of worked out.
And how difficult was it for you, though, internally to keep that a secret?
Well, my concern was twofold. One was I didn't want to make anybody uneasy, and I certainly was respectful of the sponsors that we had, and I was very respectful of the fans that I had. So my biggest worry was if it ever was found out that I was gay on a public platform, that I suddenly would be very vulnerable, and maybe I would disappoint my fan base. And my fan base, mind you, has been behind me for over 40 years. And so far, I've gotten complete 100% support from them. I'm sure that there's some people that are shocked and say, I don't want to be his friend anymore, but a majority of the fans have been super supportive, and they said, one of the greatest things that somebody said to me, they said, you not only are a great racing driver, but you're a great person. Wow. And that, to me, is one of the greatest compliments anybody can give me.
Exactly. You can't get any better than that. So that's wonderful. So what made you, because you just came out, correct, like last year or so? It's just been recent?
Yeah, it's the sort of the book. The book came first, and then the documentary came after that. And both the book and the documentary came at a time when, I had granted a high school senior an interview, and it was the same kind of interview that I've done thousands of times before. And this young gentleman, he was doing his term paper on the business of racing, and he arrived right on the dot, dressed very professionally, and sat down. He was a good-looking kid, sat down, and, we started the interview. And about halfway through the interview, he stopped sort of cold in his tracks. He looked directly at me, and he said, I need your advice. He said, some friends of mine had told me that you would be a good source to go to because you have good ideas. And he said, I'm gay. I wake up every morning and I think about suicide. I've been bullied my whole entire life, and I just feel like a piece of garbage. And I said, just hold on for a minute. And I said, always remember one thing. It's not what you are, but it's who you are. And it's the who you are is what people remember. And if you put your head down and you go forward and you don't let barriers stand in your way to make forward progress, you're going to accomplish what you want to do in life. And you have to find out what that mission is and then go at it 100% and don't let, no stop you. And he left the interview with a fairly good idea in his mind, I hoped, that he would be able to overcome this. And then I never heard from him again. And then suddenly, about, I don't know, a year and a half or 2 years later, I get a call for what turns out to be his mother. And, I had this sort of sinking feeling in my heart that, she's calling me up to say that he's committed suicide. But no, she said, what you told my son saved his life. And that, coming from a mother is pretty heavy stuff.
Wow. Yes.
So I just figured, if I can save one kid, if my voice is strong enough to save one kid, then maybe I can save 2 kids, 10 kids or 100 kids. And so that was really kind of the reason why I said, okay, now's the time. I'm retired, and I still have a voice. The voice is strong, and let's go and see if we can do some good.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's wonderful. That's what it's all about, leaving a legacy. And each and every one of us has a purpose of some sort, and some of us have a bigger platform, and obviously you have a bigger platform in which you can help, more people. So kudos to you for doing that. If you're just tuning in, you are listening to the Jan Price Show, all about movies, and my guest today is Hurley Haywood, who is an international sports car star who has won, he's a 5-time 24-hour Daytona winner, 3-time Le Mans winner, and a Trans Am champion, and many other champions through the years. So that was the motivation for you to finally come out and talk about this. But you've been with your partner for quite a long time. At least 40, was it 40 years that you've been together?
35 years.
35 years. Okay, so how did you keep...
We met in, I'm terrible at math, I think we met in 1979.
Okay, that's 40 years.
Yeah.
This year, 40 years this year. So how did you, and then you got married when you finally got married?
We got married in December of 2011.
Okay, so it hasn't been
in New York.
In New York. Okay, so it hasn't been that long. So and I love the interviews with your partner. Interesting though, but how did you keep that quiet and a secret? Because you had to. I know it hurt him a little bit that he wasn't able to celebrate your wins with you the way he would like to, as a partner should. So can you talk a little bit about that?
That's not necessarily true. We decided that when New York made it legal to marry in New York, we decided, okay, now's the time. We've been together for 40 years, but it was now legally acceptable to get married. The Supreme Court had issued, I think the Supreme Court actually made that ruling that marriage was legal nationwide after we had gotten married. But we put together a group of friends, of really close friends, and went up to New York and got married in Central Park, right on the bridge. And it was a beautiful day, and it was a perfect thing. We had a beautiful lunch and dinner in New York at some of the great restaurants there, and it was really a lot of fun. But we didn't want to make it, we didn't want to make a lot of hoopla about it. We just wanted to be a personal thing with our closest friends. So that's why, a lot of people didn't know about it.
But I meant as far as through the years with your partner, that when you were racing still and you were winning, he had to stay in the background is what I meant, not after you got married. And he's not really comfortable with being in the limelight. He's really, shy, just kind of like I am. And he just preferred to stand, behind me. But, there were a few circumstances, and he'd mentioned those in the film, where he felt really excluded and, looking at Victory Lane through a chain link fence with his friends. And that was something that, it was unfortunate that he was there, but it was something, he was there because he didn't want to make a scene. He didn't want to, give me a big kiss on Victory Lane, and because he knew that would make him uncomfortable and it would make me uncomfortable. Right. Exactly.
So he just said, "Okay, I'm gonna stay behind, and we'll celebrate when we get home."
That's great. And even heterosexual couples could feel the same way. Wanting to keep their relationship quiet and not being out in the public limelight so much. Hurley, do you think that? Well, first of all, when did you realize that you were gay?
Pretty early in my life.
Really?
I mean, yeah, it was. I mean, I had girlfriends, serious girlfriends, and but I knew from a relatively early age that there was something just a little bit off. And when I finally admitted to myself that, hey, you must be gay, that was difficult to accept, because I wanted to be a racing driver, but it was something that I was just going to have to deal with and push through it. And, one of the things that I hope the film brings away is that when barriers get in your way, you have to knock the barrier down or you're not going to forward. And those barriers are in everybody's life. I don't care what you do. And when you let that barrier impede your forward progress, it's just not going to work. And that was my case. I had to knock that barrier down and not worry about what somebody said, and just my voice was my right foot.
Right. I was going to say, do you think because you were keeping this secret that you worked even harder doing what you do?
Yeah, that was asked of me not too long ago, and I think there's a lot of pressure to perform at absolutely the highest level humanly possible, and I think that's a little bit magnified by the fact that yes, you're gay, and now you have to prove that gay guys can drive just as fast as straight guys, and so that's kind of what I thought, and I didn't let being gay stand in the way of me being a good racing driver.
That's great, and you certainly didn't. We have time for maybe one more question, and that is, how did you and Patrick Dempsey connect? Because you work together now.
Yeah, I've known Patrick for a long time. When he was racing for Mazda, he would always come up and ask advice, and I would give him advice, and he, I thought that it would be really great if we were able to get him over on the Porsche side. And so we worked hard, and he managed to secure a ride with Porsche. He had his own team. Basically, they were racing here in the States. When he was racing here in the States, he raced under our banner, the Brumos Porsche banner, and then when he was in Europe, it was Proton. So it was really a good relationship, and he trusted me, and I trusted him. And so when the sort of the storyline came out on this documentary, he was really excited that I accepted to do that. And then it all just sort of, we went in a few different directions at the beginning, but it all kind of came together once we sort of got feet on the ground and knew what direction we wanted to go in. And then it all came out really well. Very proud of it.
That's great. I have one more quick question. I live in Carmel, California. Have you ever raced at Laguna Seca?
I've raced at Laguna a lot. Yeah, that was one of my first tracks that I ever raced at. Actually, it was in Laguna in the early 70s, 71, I think. And then I've won a bunch of races there. I'm going to be the Grand Marshal there this year.
Oh, when?
At Laguna for the Vintage Festival.
Yeah. The Encore d'Elegance?
Yep. Well, it's over that weekend.
It's over that weekend, yeah. The historic races.
The Monterey Classics is what they call it.
We'll have to meet. We'll have to make sure I meet you then when you're in town. Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure talking with you. And I wish you much success with this documentary entitled Hurley and with the rest of your career.
Okay, well, thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
You too. Thank you, Hurley. Go to the Jan Price Show on Facebook to learn more about upcoming shows, and while you are there, please like my page. And to listen to the Price Movie Minutes movie reviews and to listen to archive shows that you may have missed, go to thejanpriceshow.com.
On Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1, streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
Hi, this is Rich Little. Join me in beautiful Carmel by the Sea the weekend of March the 29th and 30th to celebrate the legendary Doris Day's 97th birthday. Enjoy a 60th anniversary screening of Pillow Talk with film host Ben Makowitz and Q&A with Doris's co-stars Jackie Joseph, Peter Marshall, and me, and a special concert by Michael Feinstein. Auctions, raffle, dog adoptions, and more. Proceeds